even Martin Morrison is here. I'm going to pray that the Lord will be with us.
Pray in tongues with Morrison is in here.
And that I'm not fired after this this thing. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for this time. We thank you that we can meet like this. And we do pray that you'd help us in our interaction to challenge, to be gospel-centered, and most of all, to bring glory to you. So I do pray that the spirit of our conversation would be one that seeks to edify and to build rather than to destroy, but to also be honest and engaged with your gospel. This we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen, amen. Thanks, brother. Welcome to everybody. I'm going to be hosting a majority of our meeting today. For those who don't know me, I'm Black Newborn, one of the ministers at Christ Church Midrand. So thank you for being with us here. Thank you for joining us. It's certainly a delight to be with all of you. We're going to have a poem just to give you a rundown of the program for today. We're going to start off with a poem by Vera. And then we'll just get into her mind about what inspired that and what some of her thoughts were in light of the poem that she's going to recite and share with us this evening. And then we'll get into a panel discussion, and people who are part of that panel discussion are Kristen Peters, Clayton Peters, and Sarah Cans. We'll be hearing from them, and then later on David will be speaking with Kaz. I'm saying his name right. David will have a brief interview with him, and then just hope with talk at the end. Just to say, if you're not speaking, can you turn your mic off? Because I can hear all your kids dreaming and playing, so it might be distracting for other people. So if you're not chatting, please just try and mute your mic. Thanks. That's pretty dope. Cool. So let me just give you a framework for where we're going today. So this is the second installment of our conversations around race. Last week we started off, I think obviously we know what's been happening in the world, what's been happening in our own country. And so we wanted to chat about those things as Christians and hear what the scriptures say to us and how we should be responding with all of this that's happening. There's a lot of narratives, there's a lot of things that are coming at us. And so I think it's only wise and godly for us as Christians to go to the Bible to respond with the gospel to all of these things. All of us can agree that we are of different ethnicities as Christians, but one thing that holds all of us together is the truth of the gospel, the truth that our Christian identity is what comes first before our ethnicities and our different races, if I should put it that way. So we wanted to chat together as Christians and see how we can help each other and have a godly and a gospel-centered response to all of this. So last week we spoke. I was part of the panel. Reggie was part of the panel. David and Prince, and so we chatted around things like the image of God and what that means for Black people particularly, and how we've seen that racism is an evil that rips value out of Black people. And it's an evil that has caused Black people to feel a sense of inferiority. And so we wanted to, again, root our identity in the truth that every person, Black, white, Indian, Asian, is made in the image of God. And that's where we find our value. And we spoke then about things like Black pride, Black power, and what that means, and why we hold on to some of those slogans. And I think just a gospel response to racism as Black people. How do we respond with the gospel as Black people? But I think at the end of that conversation, I realized that we've had this conversation before, just even in the not so far, so distant history rather, when Penny Sparrow happened, and I remember just Christ Church rising to the occasion and speaking about matters of racism, there was a lot of Black people who spoke about their pain. There was a lot of Black people who spoke about Black inferiority, a lot of Black people trying to give white people, if I should put it that way, and other races, an understanding of what racism has done to us as a people, just the generational hurt that we've experienced, and just some of the scars that we've been carrying as Black people. And so when obviously George Floyd happened and everybody again started speaking about race, I just felt that it was Black people again who were speaking about our pain and where we at and what all of this has been doing to us. And so I realized that if there's still racism that's still perpetuated, and there's still Black people who feel inferior today, it's not that there's racism that's happening within the Black community. Obviously, that would be tribalism. That wouldn't be racism. So there's clearly cracks in the white community, and we know that for the longest time, white people have been told to sit on the sidelines and just keep quiet and listen. But I just felt that we needed to hear from white voices, especially as Christians. So if we're coming together, this is not a black and white thing, but it is we Christians together coming to fight against an evil, which is racism. So we wanted to just hear what conversations are white people having. What are some of the things that are happening around the dinner table? What are some of the conversations that are happening around the braai stand? What are some of the conversations that are happening at the golf course? So that we can stand along with our white brothers and sisters as Black Christians as well, to pray together, to wrestle together with these issues so that we can all come to a solution. And so tonight is largely going to be about that, voices that are not Black, and hearing what conversations are happening in other communities and other families in light of this. So that we can also get a perspective that is different from the perspective that I believe we've been hearing, which is the Black perspective. So that's roughly that. If there's any questions, please do drop them in the chat session. If we have time for them, we'll get back to them. If not, David and all his wisdom that's in his big head, he'll tell us when we can have those questions answered, whether it will be in this session or the next session. But please feel free to engage, drop questions, and let all of us engage with the conversation that's happening. So without any further ado, let me introduce Vera if she's here. I'm using my phone, so I can only see 4 people at a time. If Vera is here, please turn on your mic and just give me a whoop whoop.
Whoop whoop.
All right, there it is. There it is. It's the whitest whoop whoop I've ever heard in my life. Vera, welcome. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your work with us. For those who don't know you, in one sentence, can you please tell us who you are?
Wow, that's putting me on the spot. I'm Vera Marbach. I am married to Torsten. We have 3 children. We live in Centurion, being part of Christchurch Midrand for 20-something years. And I facilitate diversity dialogue.
That's cool. Thanks for that, Vera. So yeah, can you just tell us the title of the poem that you're sharing with us, and then you can jump straight into it. At the end, we'll just have a quick conversation about the thoughts behind that. So over to you, Vera.
I chose quite a short poem, but yeah, I think it carries a lot of meaning. It's called Privilege. Not an accusation, no verdict expected. Not an attack, defense inappropriate. A historical fact, a present reality. Uncomfortable awareness, given responsibility. Humble agency, social leverage. Powerful potential for participative change. That's it.
Thank you, Vera. So I think let's get into it. Privilege. So why that title?
So I wrote this poem in 2016 when the word privilege had become a sword in people's hands. It was a label that people were fighting not to be labeled by and to label others with. And I didn't feel that the conversation was very helpful. And that's what the first verse is about. And what I felt was more helpful was to actually look at what privilege really meant to me and what privilege I had. And that's what the second verse is about, that it actually is a historical fact. It still affects us today. And it is uncomfortable to recognize that. But I also feel that it's given by God. And I have a responsibility of what I do with this. So I do believe that who I am and what I have is all given by God. And He has placed me in this country at this time for a purpose. So I need to ask myself, what am I going to do with the privilege that I've been given? What kind of a steward am I going to be? And how am I going to love my neighbor, to be salt and light in the world? And how am I going to contribute to the unity in the church with this privilege? And how am I going to follow in Jesus' footsteps? Because I see that He did not hold on to the privilege that He had, but that He actually became a servant, took on the nature of a servant to us, washed His disciples' feet, went to the cross for us, and was in the constrictions of a human body, having been outside of everything, having, that experience of being God. So yeah, that's really what led to this poem.
Sure, that's cool. I think then in light of the conversation that we're having today, what are some of the conversations that you've been having with white people who don't want to be labeled as privileged, or people, like you said, who felt like, that's a sword. That's kind of a painful topic. I don't want to go there. Have you been having conversations with other white people about privilege? If so, what are some of those? Can you give us insights?
So I think one of the things is that often privilege is unaware. So we're not aware of a lot of things. We just take them for granted. And I think that's what I've seen in some of my conversations with people, with white people, non-Black people lately, is that there are some assumptions that are being made that, for example, just given the whole COVID situation, there are people are making assumptions about what people have and the access that people have to education, the data that they need, and that kind of thing. And then in the context of what the Black Lives Matter movement has, the issues that they've brought up, in discussing these issues, I realize I'm privileged because I'm not re-traumatized by the videos. Those videos don't bring up previous examples of racism that I've been exposed to. So in that, I'm actually privileged that I can talk about it without having to relive the traumas of the past. I've also noticed that people just assume that they can have an intellectual or what they call an objective conversation about this. And actually, it's not that. It's a privileged conversation because of the fact that it doesn't actually trigger us emotionally. So that's been coming to light. And also, even if some of us have felt that we want to just ignore it, we want to just hide in our houses in the seclusion of this social distancing and not actually deal with it because it doesn't connect with our world. And that again just shows another aspect of our privilege. So I think those are the main things that I felt around the conversation here. And I think it brings up some of the previous conversations again about education, transport, networks that we are connected with, the language that gets spoken, transport in public taxis and that kind of thing. And just this awareness of what kind of influence we have on a situation, what kind of influence, the atmosphere changes when a white person is part of something. So the atmosphere in some of the marches has changed because white people have been there. And sometimes there's just not an awareness that things really change as soon as white people come into the room.
Sure. Can you elaborate on that for us? Because obviously, as you're saying that I'm interpreting it in one way, but what do you mean that the atmosphere changes when white people come into the room, or the example you gave now with the marches? Yeah.
So with white people coming into the room, I think one of the first changes that happens is often the language changes. So people
Sure.
start communicating in English out of a sense of just wanting to include the person who's now joined, who doesn't understand the colloquial language that may have been used beforehand. And I think there's also a guardedness to what can be said. Some people feel that they can't be open about some of the comments that they would make if a white person wasn't in the room. So it influences the topic of the conversation as well. Yeah, and then the issue about marches is a difficult one. Yeah, because I have very mixed feelings. In one sense, I think that white people should be at a march, at a Black Lives Matter march. But in another sense, I don't want so much fuss to be made about them. They should just be there. Why does it have to be that suddenly the spotlight falls on them? You know, it just feels like just their being there changes things. Yeah.
Sure. So, thanks for that. And I think obviously I would love for us to kind of get more into that. You're still going to be around, obviously. And I think if there's any questions that come in light of what you said, I'll just throw them at you, and then you can answer some of those. I'm just thinking about time. Obviously, I didn't mention it at the beginning, but we're going to be here till 7:30. So yeah, please. I'm trying to keep that in mind as well. But Vera, thank you so much for sharing your poem. Thank you for your insights as well. I think just in closing, what can we pray for in light of what you've shared with us? So if other brothers and sisters want to stand alongside you, because the conversation about privilege is a massive one. And I think just some of the things that you brought up probably had a couple of people's blinkers turning on. And so, like I said, we don't have much time to kind of get into it. But what would you want us to pray for in light of what you shared?
So I think one of the big things for me, having been involved in running diversity dialogues for quite a long time, is the fact that there are few people, white people, who come to these conversations. And I think we should really pray that more people become involved and that they are willing to share that space and listen to Black people. And I think there's also, for me, I think it's also about a long-term commitment to change. It's easy to put up your hand and say, oh yes, yeah, I believe, Black Lives Matter, and to put the black color on your WhatsApp profile. But in terms of really long-time practical change, I think we as white people need to really talk about the kinds of practical things that we can do. And there are many, and they are not that huge and that difficult. It might be a big change in terms of our attitude and our awareness, but there are many things that can be done. And I would really pray that more white people become committed to long-term change.
Look, thanks for that, Vera. We'll definitely be praying for that. I think at the end of this session, we'll remember that prayer. It is a huge one, and I totally agree with you. So thank you again for sharing your work with us in peace. I wish we were live, and then, obviously, like together, so we could clap or snap, so that you could feel the appreciation in the room. I see people just snapping there and clapping. That's pretty dope. Thanks, Ntanhla. Cool, man. So we'll jump into our panel discussion. The people I mentioned at the beginning, Clayton Peters, Kristen Peters, and Sarah Cans are joining us. So I'm going to ask them to just intro themselves. Again, just one sentence, if you could just tell us who you are, and then we'll get into the panel discussion. I gave them questions before, so I'll be turning to my computer screen just to remember some of those questions. I'm not ignoring you at all. But yeah, without any further ado, if the Peters can introduce themselves, and then Sarah can just tell us as well who she is.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Clayton Peters, and I'm married to Michelle, and we have 3 kids, Michaela, Kristen, and Bukang. We are followers of Christ, and I'm a follower of Liverpool as well, in that particular order. And just happy to be here tonight.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen Peters. I am the daughter of Clayton Peters. I am in grade 11 and I attend Christ Church College. And I am so lucky to be here and to learn from everybody.
Thanks, man. Sarah?
Okay, I'm in. I'm Sarah. I've been a Christian since I was 25, which it's actually a very long time ago. And I am a mother of 2 children and a wife of Lee, and I'm basically nobody from nowhere, but that's me.
Cool. Yeah, thanks again for your willingness to want to be here. Obviously, these matters are sensitive, and it's daunting in one sense to talk about the stuff and to jump into deep waters like this. So really appreciate your guys' willingness to just want to come through and chat to us. I think I'm gonna, just for the panel, those questions that are asked to all 3 of you, and then other times there's questions that are direct to the individuals. I'll just mention your name and then direct the question to you, so that you know. I think I wanted to start with Sarah. Just ask you this first question. I think at least in my observations and just reading up stuff, at least in the past 5 years or plus, a lot of people, Black people, have said that white people need to sit on the sidelines and not say anything, just be silent and hear Black voices speak in light of these issues. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on where you at with that sentiment, then and now. When initially you heard that white people should just keep quiet and listen, what were your thoughts? And now, because of how things have developed, rather, where are you with that sentiment?
Okay, I just think it's important that just to note that I can't speak for all white people, because there are a lot of us and we all quite different. But I can speak to my personal experience, and to give you a sense, I have lived a privileged life. I lived and grew up in Joburg. I went to a private school. The people that I kind of grew up with were all from private schools. We went to university together. We all have good jobs. We live in a pretty good sort of upper middle class area, and our children go to private schools. So that's my context. And I think I'm going to talk about the kind of white circles that I've moved in. I think I still think some people still should just take some time to listen, and to listen to learn and not listen to respond, because I feel there are still a lot of people who still listen to try and respond or defend. And I still get a very strong sense of defensiveness. My children are Black and adopted, and I often am seen as like the kind of person that white people can come and talk to about which I wish sometimes they wouldn't, because some of the things that are said are just quite painful for me to hear. But they do speak to me about, race issues and that sort of thing. So I think there is I still think there is scope for people to really listen, but also for them to want to listen.
Sure.
And I think I'm going to allude to, please cut me short if I'm going on for too long. I think I'm going to allude to what Vera was saying about people spending some time getting to know, actually being willing to put themselves in an uncomfortable space. So my thinking is, and my sense of the people that I mix with, is that white people are, the ones that I hang with, are comfortable. They don't want to feel uncomfortable, and they are the product of apartheid, and they have not had the benefit of a decent history education, and they have no interest in getting that or understanding it until it affects them directly. And now this is obviously, I'm grossly generalizing across groups, but every now and then something happens, and then there's suddenly like a wake up, and then it's like, oh gosh, this is quite serious, and let me look beyond myself. And I don't think it's only white people. I think people inherently are selfish, and if things are going well, like if COVID never hit South Africa, I'm not sure we'd be that worried about it. So sure. I think there's a level of selfishness and a level of comfort that perhaps leaves white people wanting to stay in that, is to keep the status quo, not wanting to change. And I think that's an obvious feeling. So I think there's a need for people to really listen, to want to listen. And there are people who genuinely want to listen and learn. And then for people not to sit on the sidelines, I would agree, and I've been encouraged by people, the unprecedented amount of white people that have joined Black Lives Matter movement. I think that's encouraging. I sit on a private school diversity committee, and a third of us are white. And it's been encouraging that it's the white people that have really pushed this at the school and encouraged discussions around this particular issue. And I think it's quite, I get the sense that a lot of my black friends are tired. They're tired of the same conversation over and over again. And maybe as, you know, as brothers and sisters, we can take that baton for a while. You know, maybe we can join in and help the fight. I think also, you know, I'm talking about a context where most of the people that I am referring to are not Christian. So I think it's different. If you're Christian, as a white Christian, it's a no-brainer. We have to speak truth to power. We cannot. I was looking at the picture of the Hector Peterson picture the other day, and we cannot 44 years later still be having these conversations. We just can't. And we need to, I would argue very strongly that white people need white Christians need to take a stand too against injustices. It's what Martin was saying earlier. We have to speak truth to power. So that's a very, very rambled answer to your question, but I hope I've sort of answered it.
No, that's dope. So white Christians particularly shouldn't keep quiet. They should speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're scared.
Sure. And that's the thing I wanted to ask you now. What are some of those fears?
No, there's huge fear. There's massive fear.
Because the thing, sorry to cut you off, but as you're talking, I'm just thinking, as a black person sitting here and listening to this, there might be other black people in the room feeling like, oh, there's another white savior complex. So you know, white people should step up and just and save the day again. And that's not what she's saying. And hence I want to just hear. Hence I want to hear some of your fears. What are your fears as white Christians? You know what I mean? Because if you don't have fears, then I think it does make it seem as though there's this white savior complex, but that's not what you're saying. So,
no. So thank you. That's definitely not what I'm saying.
To humanize you, what are your fears that as brothers we can pray for, stand alongside you, and fight alongside you with?
I think anyone who has a heart to stand alongside this particular issue is terrified of getting it wrong. You know, if you're white in South Africa, it feels like, and it's probably true, there's absolutely nothing we can do. We can't make it better. You know what I mean? We can't. I don't know. I think it would be for wisdom to speak the right thing without offending people. I think most of the time the fear is huge around saying the wrong thing, you know, and doing the wrong thing and offending people when you genuinely want to help or be a part of the solution in some shape or form. You genuinely want to, you know, humbly, you know, be a part of the solution. So it's really wisdom. It's so difficult to know what to do and what to say. We are a very good product of apartheid. So I've been blessed with the most amazing people who've kind of guided me and rebuked me along the way and helped me a little bit. But I know I'm a struggling racist, and I'm often saying and doing the wrong things all the time. And I think it's really just to be able to learn really quickly so that we can actually be helpful and not a hindrance. I think that's my biggest kind of fear. I sometimes wonder if we can get there. Sometimes I feel completely disheartened. Sometimes I feel like I don't know if we can get there, but I can't stop fighting because we have to, you know.
Sure, that's cool. Yeah, I think thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate you just bearing your heart for us. And we want to stand with you as fellow Christians. And I think, with that said, I just wanted to hand over to Clayton and just ask Clayton, should we even be engaging in politics as Christians? Is that a place for us? If so, how should we be doing it? I think just from my understanding, Clayton, you've been involved in navigating these waters even in your younger days, and you're still concerned about chatting about these things. How should we be doing it? Should we be doing it, Clayton?
Yeah, I think the very short answer is yes, because politics consumes, especially in modern day South Africa, politics is such an integral part of our lives. You know, whether you're driving to work and you're frustrated with your e-tolls bill racking up, or the fact that you have a job and that you're driving to one, you know, your kids are going to school, etc. Politics shapes all these kinds of things, but you know, we must diffuse some of the tensions and the myths around that question. And I mean, I remember that in the 80s, I was a student and youth activist, and it was a particularly tough day. One day I'd come back and I was attending an evening service at our church. But it was a difficult day because we were leading a student protest on campus, and the security police came in and arrested many of my friends, and I was lucky to escape. And that evening, when the leader asked for prayer requests, you know, I shared with him my prayer request that I was worried that quite a few of my friends were arrested. And I was worried that, you know, their safety, whether they would be released, whether they would come out unhurt, etc. And in the course of that prayer, nobody prayed for that. And I spoke to some of the elders afterwards about, you know, why nobody prayed for that request. And the simple answer I got was, young man, you're going down the wrong path. You're going down the path that leads to communism. It's anti-God. You know, you should be focusing on our pathway to heaven. and you should be focusing on the kingdom that lies ahead of us, not in the kingdom that we're living in. And I think that was the evangelical theology at that time. You know, politics is something that's dirty. It's something that these ANC communists are involved in. It's not for us people who want to get to heaven. And I think that, you know, over these 20, 30 years or so, some of that thinking has changed, but I think it's so ingrained, especially in our evangelical church, that there's a reluctance to engage in politics, because even though it affects so many aspects of our lives, we still have that thinking that this is something that's, you know, that we shouldn't bother ourselves with, because ultimately our role is to get to heaven and to bring as many people with us on their journey to heaven. And, you know, nothing could be further from the truth than that line of thinking. Because God has called us to be, you know, his agents of peace, of justice. He's called us to spread his word, and his word includes, you know, politics. Now, when I say politics, I'm not talking about party politics. I'm talking about politics that stands for justice, politics that gives a voice to the oppressed, politics that speaks on with and on behalf of the poor and the marginalized and the oppressed. You know, that's the kind of politics that I'm talking about. Sure. And Christians should be engaged in that. Christians should be, you know, standing, you know, for the poor, because sometimes they have no voice. And and it's up to us as Christians, whether we're white or whether we're black or Indian or colored, etc. We should be engaging and bringing that voice, because, you know, the marginalized and the poor find it difficult to be heard in the corridors of power and where decisions are taken. And so, yes, we must engage in politics. Should you wish to engage in party politics, I mean, that's your individual decision. And I don't think the church should be engaged in party politics, but the church should be engaged, and Christians should be engaged in the questions that are of a political nature that affect, you know, all of us. So, as I said, the short version is yes.
Sure. Thanks for that. I remember last week we had Ann Matthews. I don't know if she's part of the meeting, but for those who don't know, Ann is an Indian woman. And she shared something with us last week, where she said that as an Indian person, in her own personal experience, she's had an experience of feeling privileged in certain spaces because she's not black, but then she's obviously like felt the evil hand of racism because she isn't white. And so it was an interesting perspective to have. And Clayton, you an Indian man, I don't know if you've had that kind of experience, and that's not necessarily the question I'm asking, but where I'm getting to is you have obviously Kristen, who's next to you, and she's a black young girl, and you have Michaela, who's an Indian girl. And so the question that I'm asking is how has the conversation around race or social justice, or even biblical justice rather, played out in your dinner table? And maybe Sarah, you can also chip in there if you want to. Just what conversations have you had with your kids around the dinner table when it comes to these issues?
Yeah, you know, I mean, so we're a mixed family, and we have all three of our children are adopted. Michaela is Indian, and Bokang and Kristen are black. And Michelle and I have always been upfront about that adoption. Well, it's not like we can hide it. So, you know, we've always been very, very upfront and have those conversations at a very early age when our kids started to understand these things. And I think sometimes in the Indian culture, adoption can be a very secretive, hush-hush kind of conversation. And we took a decision at the very outset that we were not going to participate in that. We're going to be upfront, about adoption, because we believe that it's a beautiful thing, and we believe that it was the right thing for our family. Now, having said that, we're a mixed family. So when we're out in the mall, we get all different kinds of, looks and stares. And I remember one particular incident where Michelle was in a bank and Kristen probably was about 6 or 7 years, and Michelle was filling out a form, and Kristen just ran away from her a little bit, and suddenly, we're looking to find Kristen, and there was this elderly Black woman holding Kristen's hand, trying to find and locate her mother. And Michelle was frantic and said, "No, but that's my child." And this lady wouldn't hear it. She said, "No, I'm going to find her mother." And Michelle just kept insisting, "That's my daughter, please, give her back to me." And this I think finally Michelle had to show another side of her and just grab Kristen by the hand. But that lady was well intentioned. But it so happened that she had grown up with a particular experience of what families should look like, and what families should be like, and what we presented was very different from what she grew up believing. So we get used to that, and it's an opportunity to have conversations about that. But we've been very upfront with our children about the fact that we're a mixed family, a mixed race family, and but we Christians first. We believers in Christ first, and it is through Him that brings us together, and that we can have a particular outlook on race, on social injustice, etc. So we've always brought up our kids to believe that race is an important issue in our society, but it's not the defining issue on everything, and that social justice is important. And that we should recognize that even though we're a mixed family, and we're a family, that is Black in the broader use of that term, we're a middle-class family. And being a middle-class family in South Africa gives us certain privileges. And being a middle-class family in South Africa, in many ways, shields us from the hardship of living in South Africa. And so we should recognize that. We should recognize the important, role that puts on us to play, because, we have these privileges, and we should be using these privileges for social justice, to address issues of inequality, etc. So that's been, something that we've tried to very proactively instill in our kids as we've raised them, to be very conscious of the things around them. And for them to believe that actually this is not because of the very hard work that their mom and dads do, etc. It's a confluence of factors, that have led us to lead the lives that we live today, and it's very privileged lifestyles. So we must recognize that, and we must make sure that we use that, to stand up for people who can't stand up on their own, and to speak about issues for people who may not be able to speak about those issues on their own.
Sure. Sarah, anything you want to add there? Or the mic is off.
I'm not sure I could have said it much better, because we have similar experiences. I think transracial family is tricky in South Africa, but we've always been very open. Obviously, we can't hide our adoption either. It's quite obvious, and we've been open about adoption, and we've been open about racism, and we have open conversations about it. My kids find it very difficult. They're still quite young. They're 12 and 10, and they find it very hard. I find it personally, I find it difficult seeing how difficult they find it. and we've been forced to have some tough ones, just because of some experiences that we've had. So that's, you know, racism cuts right through our family because I have to tell my kids that people of my color have done something terrible to people of their color. So that's very hard. But we can't shy away from it. It's the reality. And I think if we weren't Christian, I don't know how we would explain, how we would find hope, because our identity is in Christ. We are all adopted. So we all adopted, and we are all family in Christ. So that is the huge comfort. That's the rock that we hang on to.
Amen. Shout outs to that. If I had one of those DJ blast sun things, I'd press it now. But I don't. Martin, please help us just in the future church budget. We need one of those DJ things, since this is how we're going to be doing church in the future. Kristen, for you, living in a diverse family, being a young Black woman, growing up in South Africa, not being like shielded from the realities of this country, knowing the history of this country. How's that been for you? What's your experience as a young Black girl living in a diverse family and the country that we live in?
I think that I have a very unique perspective on being Black, because I have grown up in a very diverse family with a majority Indian perspective. And I'm also very privileged to go to a private school where my exposure to Black people is also, they're very privileged Black people. They're Black people from a middle-class family. So a lot of the inequality I haven't firsthand experienced, but it doesn't make me any less passionate. I'm so thankful that my mom works at a school for the underprivileged. So I do have interactions with people who are less privileged than I am. And I think learning and experiencing and just talking to them about their experiences has really opened my eyes to my kind of privilege. And I think that it's so important that as a young person from a middle class family, that I understand that I have that kind of privilege. And I think that being a Black female, there were a lot of struggles that I went through, very minor struggles that I've had to overcome. I remember, I think my earliest memories, and I've been talking to my parents about this, going into the malls and talking to Black people in the mall, and they would constantly talk to me in vernacular, and I would go, Mom, why are they talking to me in vernacular? I don't understand. What do I say? So I've had to understand that, it's not just because I don't speak that kind of language doesn't make me any less Black. And I think that's been a personal struggle for me, is because I felt this imposter syndrome in every single aspect of my life. I'm not Indian enough, but I'm not Black enough either. And I think that for me as a young female, to try and figure out that avenue, that no one is 100% Black, no one is 100% Indian, and that it's unfair for me to think that I'm going to be 100% Black, or I'm going to be 100% Indian. So I think that has been a personal struggle. But also as a Gen Z, I think a struggle that I've had is, especially during this time, is having real and open conversations with my friends about race and racism. I think that it's very difficult to have a real and honest conversation without being insensitive, especially since my friend group and my community at school is very diverse. It's very hard to be inclusive, but yet also explain my own struggle as a Black person. So I think that a struggle that I've had being a Gen Z is to have these honest and real conversations.
Sure. And what do you think and it's probably a big question, but what do you think part of the solution can be in us, in your generation, actually having these conversations. So I don't know if there's anything that you've spoken to your dad about, or just some thoughts that you've had. What does the way forward look like for you?
I think that it starts with what we're doing right now, having these kind of conversations. I think that what's so important is to be open and, like my dad said, to talk about politics. I think that talking about politics is also very taboo in school. If we raise a hand and have we ask a question about race, it's like, oh no, it's not the time for that. And I think that what's really important is that one, in your community, is to have these kind of conversations. Have these conversations with your family members. Have these conversations with your friends. In the school context, is to also make sure that these conversations are being, that we're having these kind of dialogues in school, because there's a lot of injustice that's happening behind the scenes in school that students feel that they can't really, speak about freely. So I think what's really important is that as students that we're not afraid, and that we have these open and real conversations, and that we stand up and we say something when injustice happens. And I think that as a student, we feel so scared, to actually say, I heard something from a teacher that was a bit, that wasn't correct. And it's very hard for us to say, hey, but that's not right, because we feel like we're not being heard. And I think that's what's really, really important, is that we shouldn't be afraid of our opinion, and that we should be able to say, hey, this is wrong. So to have these conversations at school. And our hope is that one day, hopefully soon, that racism and not race won't be a barrier in a lot of people's lives. And I think that for many, many people, race is a huge hurdle that they have to overcome. And our hope and our prayer is that one day that won't exist. That in the future, my brother won't have to have these conversations now. That my brother won't have to experience racism in any form. That really is I think everybody's hope, is that nobody experiences racism and nobody experiences racial discrimination.
Sure. I think we can end the meeting and vote for Kristen to be president. That's it. We're done. We can all go home. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Kristen.
so much.
Really, really appreciate that. I just wanted to pose this next question to Sarah and Clayton. So there's a placard I saw, a picture rather, of somebody holding a placard, and I just want to read what was on the placard. It said that George Floyd isn't a wake-up call. The same alarm has been ringing since 1969. Y'all just keep hitting the snooze. And so what the person was saying is, everybody was saying that the murder of George Floyd was a wake-up call for white people, for non-black people. And so what this placard is saying is that George Floyd actually isn't a wake-up call, but white people or non-white, non-black people have just been hitting the snooze, because for generations, as we look into history, a lot of people have been standing up and fighting. A lot of people have been making noise, but it just feels like white people particularly, but I'd say non-whites have just been hitting the snooze and not engaging. And so there's a sense of ignorance, or rather a sense of not wanting to engage with the matters and the evil that we see of racism towards black people. I know, Sarah, you kind of alluded to this earlier on, but I just wanted you and Clayton, to just share with us. We'll start off with Sarah. What are some of those fears? What are some of those comforts that white people are holding on to, or non-black people that are holding on to? Vera spoke of privilege. Sarah, you spoke of privilege. Clayton spoke of privilege. What is it that you holding, or white people, non-black people are holding on to, that makes it hard for them to engage with, or at the level at least, of the pain that black people are feeling?
Well, I mean, I kind of spoke to it a bit earlier around not wanting to feel uncomfortable. So I think that is a cause of the kind of resistance to engage on this, and to own it, to say people find it really difficult to admit that they're a product of apartheid and whatever they've got is ill-gotten gain. You know, that's quite a tough thing for people to swallow. So it's so much easier to avoid or to kind of nod your head and do something else. I know, yeah, I think that's a large part of it, is just a defensiveness, a lack of will to admit responsibility or any form of accountability, because then what do you do after that?
Sure.
So I mean that's my feeling. Yeah, and just a general kind of just a complete lack of understanding or knowledge. A lot of the time, you know, when someone says all lives matter, it really is an indication that they don't fully understand what Black Lives Matters actually means. They don't understand the context. They don't understand that it actually is not about all lives matters, you know. So I think, yeah, I think that's it's a real ignorance and a lack of wanting to learn. Yeah.
Sure. Clayton, for you?
Yeah. Look, there's a story in the Bible where Jesus encounters a man and he prays for him, and he asks the man, you know, what do you see? And he says, look, I see people, but they look like trees. And he prays again for the man and he says, you know, what do you see? And he was finally able to see everything clearly, and he saw people. And I honestly think in South Africa, you know, our white brothers and sisters need a second touch. You know, you wonder in this country where, you know, the apartheid system and racism was one of the most brutal and inhumane systems ever to walk this planet. And yet, church attendance was 90, 100% in many communities. And you wonder, how do you reconcile the two? What's happening here, you know? And I'm not, you know, Royden and Martin and the other pastors on this call can give us the theological understanding of how to interpret that prayer of Jesus. But I honestly think, you know, white South Africans and to a large extent Indian and colored South Africans need a second touch so the blinkers can fall off, you know, and they can see the pain, they can see people, they can see past their ignorance, they can see past their own comfort, you know. That second touch is more symbolic, you know. I'm not saying that it's a real thing, but I'm speaking in symbolism here. You know, that second touch needs to happen, you know, where the blinkers can fall off, where we can see things, you know, as they are. And I'm not saying it's instantaneous, it may be a journey, but it needs to happen at some point or the other, you know, and we need to be asking God, take away these blinkers so that I can see what's happening around me, I can feel what's happening around me, I can participate in what's happening around me, you know, and because I think without that, it becomes so easy to continue with things as normal. You know, we lead comfortable lives in the suburbs, disconnected from the harsh realities of poverty and injustice, etc. And you know, I think that a lot of our white brothers and sisters feel a lot of guilt. That's good. Guilt can be a good motivator to do things, you know. So use that guilt, let it motivate you to do things right, to challenge things. And I think a lot of times, you know, we want to play this part in fighting, you know, against racial inequality, and we say, I'm okay, you know, my attitudes are right, and I treat people right, etc. So racism, you know, should skip me and move on to the next person to address. And oftentimes it comes out when you interact with people, especially in stressful situations. And then you begin to see, actually, I'm not okay, you know, the attitudes that I have, the things that I say, etc., in how it finds expression when I interact at an interpersonal level, you know. And those are the realities. And I think that, you know, it's easy for me to address the things that are in me, but it becomes harder when I have to address the things that are in my father, in my mother, my sisters, in the people that I work with, you know, because, you know, that's racism at that interpersonal level, you know. And am I challenging those kinds of things? Because oftentimes it's hard for Christians to locate themselves in like national politics, you know, and they say these issues are just too far away from me, and it's highly unlikely that I'll make any impact there. But they can make an impact in the things that are around them, you know. I think Mandela understood this thing well. He understood the need for symbolism. He understood the need to do things differently, you know. And when you have white people challenging other white people on the attitudes that they have, you know, it's an important message that's being sent in society. When you have white people, you know, speaking up on land reform, as an example, writing articles, it's an important thing. It says to people that actually there are people out there in society that, you know, are willing to take a stand on these issues. And I think it's a challenge for our own church as well. I mean, Royden is here, Martin is here, the other ministers are here. What are you preaching every Sunday, you know? What are the examples that you're using in your sermon? How are they connecting with people? How are you challenging people? You know, not just in terms of the pious relationship with God, but what expression does that find itself in social justice issues, in addressing racial inequality? Because I think that we could be doing more on that front. We could be trying to make this gospel more applicable to our current day realities, you know. And so in those ways, you know, we play a fight. We play an important part in fighting against racial inequality. And so, you know, we should not try and dislocate it from ourselves. But in doing that, we should also understand that we have a greater role to play, you know, beyond just myself and my immediate surroundings.
Sure. Clayton, thank you so much for that. And I think, you kind of gave us a mouthful there. I was going to ask a question just about how faith obviously speaks into all of this, and I think you touched on that quite well. I want to hand over to David because of time, and then what I'm going to do is just go through some of the questions that have been given in the chat section, and if there's time at the end, I'll come back to Clayton, Sarah, and Kristen to kind of pose those questions and see if they can engage and answer them. But thank you so much to Sarah. Thank you to Clayton. Thank you to Kristen for sharing such, on a personal level, candidly, and just helping us wrestle through, the question that we're talking about today. So I'm going to hand over to Gobedi, and then hopefully we'll jump back if there's more time at the end. So please give it up where you are to the three panelists that we had. Thank you so much for your time. Cool.
Thank you so much, Black. Clayton is officially on under church discipline for calling out his ministers. So that we have it on record here. I mean, I do think, just to respond to that, I think we are trying, and I think part of this platform is for us to not keep quiet and address those. And I think, there's always room to do more. Somebody Yeah, so just to say that it's never, I think we need to start now in this kind of platform and continue the conversation. So we're learning, we're improving, and we're always seeking to apply the gospel to every area of our life. I'm not being defensive. I'm just saying that this is a start. But it is, all those comments were gold. I'm not even sure if I should say anything at the end, but hopefully we'll have time to do that. Just to say that if you do want to stay behind after 7:30, please do so that we can have a Q&A after 7:30. Everyone is welcome to leave. You don't have to go. You can stick around for a Q&A if you want, but we just want to release everyone at that time. So tonight we have a special guest. He is affectionately known to his students as Dr. Koz. He's from Philly in the US, and he's joining us from there. And just to introduce him, or does he want to introduce himself maybe? Koz, okay, so Koz is, he is a lecturer at Keynes University, and he's from Australia. And as Martin always say, we don't hold that against him, but he's been living in the States for about 25 years. He's involved in a lot of justice in his city of Philadelphia, but he's also a lecturer at the university, Keynes University, and he teaches open missions. Am I correct in that? Dr. Koz, it's great to have you join us this evening. And I thought, as like we obviously dealing with these issues, we obviously from a South African context, just to get a perspective that's different, that is from someone who's an outsider would be helpful for us. So you deal with a lot of Christian thinking. You want your students to just get something of a Christian understanding of how the gospel impacts the way they do life and ministry within the context that they placed in. Am I correct in saying that that's your sort of aim?
Yeah, that's my hope. Yeah.
So I just have a few questions for you, like specifically for, and I know we use this term quite a lot, evangelicalism. I guess for me, in the States, there's a lot of, I guess, implications of what that means. But like just any Bible-believing Christian church, and what has been historically in the States, the stance towards or against or for racial injustice back then and now? Like, what has been some of the responses that Christians have had? So just think of it as like a first year coming into your lecture room. What is the thinking regarding the issue of race?
Yeah, so I think there's a definition piece to begin with. That very, very few African Americans or Latinos would identify as evangelicals, even if their theology lines up to be evangelical. So most of the conversation here, when you use the term evangelical, means middle and upper class white. So it's also a social and political position. I think it's also important to know that the church in the US is, in my opinion, is the most segregated section of society. So the diversity index in the church is less than 3%. So although I live in a Black community, but the city is quite mixed with Black leadership. Schools tend to be quite mixed, but church is highly segregated. And so there'd be plenty of substantial argument to say that the church has been a perpetuator of the racism, and particularly the evangelical church has been a perpetuator of that. And one of the reasonings that would be given is that evangelicalism has put a lot of onus, a lot of direction on this idea of a personal relationship with Jesus. And so whereas you mostly get the black and brown communities in the US saying, look, these are systemic issues that are created and everybody either benefits or is punished by these systems. The white evangelical tends to focus on their individual piece and say, well, I didn't create this, or I'm not an architect of this, or, you know, I'm personally not racist, might be their comments. And because of that individualism, they tend to get around any accountability to the system. So I'd say that. And I'd say, you know, we still use this letter from the Birmingham jail is referred to by Martin Luther King. And that was written 52 years ago, 53 years ago. And I would say that it is pretty much dead on accurate now as it was when it was written, which was his particular critique of the white evangelical, the moderate, who he believed was the biggest threat to the civil rights movement, far greater threat than the overt right-wing Ku Klux Klan types of groups. He felt like the white evangelical was the biggest threat to the movement forward.
I feel like that's a fair judgment, and why? Like, why do you say that?
Yeah, I think so. Some comes from like this idea of the individualism. So some comes because it's a pretty continual message to say, you know, just wait. We're working on it for you. We're going to fix this for you. Yeah. You know, with the protests that have gone on and the protests that turned to rioting, one of the really fascinating things was the continual voice that said, it's okay to protest, but as long as your protests don't disrupt anybody, or as long as they don't turn violent, because violent protest certainly isn't a Christian thing to do. Now, this is in counter to the idea that the US was birthed out of violent protests. The biggest holiday in the United States is the 4th of July, which is a celebration of violent protest against the British. And that violent protest was heavily backed by the churches at the time. That would be my opinion, but so there's this kind of voice that keeps saying, well, you know, we're working on this, we're listening. Or as a lot of my friends here would say, is that the nice white person is a big part of the problem, because what do? You know, they do nice things for people. They give money to the poor, they come and do missions trips, they do those kinds of things. So how can you accuse us of being racist? But there's no change in the power dynamic. So who maintains power and how that power is used has not been changing.
Yeah, so I mean, I read some of that letter, and I think one of the things that struck me, which resonates to this day, is the fact that like people or Christians would come and say, now we condemn this act of violence. And he says, well, like, why don't you condemn the things that started this thing? Why are you more vocal when it comes to that? I mean, so you've been involved with Christians grappling with these issues. What's your take? Do you feel like now the church is listening? Is there repentance? Like what are some of the things that Christians are struggling with and are repenting from during this time?
Yeah, so I think there's some, I like to teach first-year university students because I feel like they got the least invested in the system and the most likely to change. So definitely amongst the younger generation, we're seeing more and more people out at the protests, more and more people wanting to take a stand. That's also marked, though, I would say that group is walking away from the church in significant numbers. And my hope is that they're walking away from evangelicalism more so than from God. Although I work for an evangelical institution, so, but I see some more hope there. I think in the older generation, there's a lot of brand protection. I think there's a lot of damage control. I think people are putting out statements. I mean, almost everything you see right now has some branding on it for Black Lives Matter, whether it's you turn on your video games or a television station or a store. And I think the church is doing a similar thing. Are they willing to dismantle any of the power structure? That's really hard to see them doing that at this point, unless it's going to cost them something. I'd say that same as companies, right? Companies are looking and saying, how much business do we lose if we don't support Black Lives Matter? Churches are looking at that same kind of an issue. I think more so than they're looking at, do we try and heal some of this racism? But I'm a little skeptical on that.
Okay. You've mentioned in our conversation that some of the Black Lives Matter movement is also mixed up with not just violence, but like a support for like the homosexual agenda, and some Christians are finding it difficult. I don't know if you want to comment on that. So a Christian is grappling with that, and like just like why are young Christians who are engaging in this Black Lives Matter moving away from church? Why do you think that's the cause?
Yeah, so there's kind of two different. The statement could mean two different things. Black Lives Matter is a small political group that has a particular agenda that's written up, like supporting a political party, and that includes issues around gender and gender identity. And so, the majority white evangelical has been fighting very hard against anything to do with gender equality in those kinds of places, right or wrong. Others will have their opinion, but so they have dismissed that and said, well, we can't ever say Black Lives Matter because we're talking about a political agenda. That's a very different feeling in the Black and brown community. So I was at a couple of rallies this week, and one of them we had about 200 pastors at, all of who would say, we're happy to say Black Lives Matter, and we don't see any association with that statement and within a political movement that has been formalized. I would also say that younger people are far less concerned about the gender issue. It seems to be one that's being, as far as wanting to be separated from it. So, the middle white evangelical conservative wants to make sure that they're not associated with anything liberal. And so they would see Black Lives Matter as being a liberal movement, whereas others would say, no, it's just a movement about the basic biblical humanity that we'd want to project on somebody.
I mean, what's your take on that? Like, as a Christian, why should I be involved as a Christian?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So our family's been pretty good at trying to follow the COVID guidelines, which is, America has a bit of a different position, I think, than South Africa or than Australia on how people follow government guidelines. The only time we've broken it is to go out to the protest because we felt like it was important that we stood with our friends in those issues. I like to say that I hope that my love and the way that I treat people isn't dependent upon whether I agree with them on all their issues, or doesn't depend upon their political point of view or their gender or their race on those issues, but that I'm willing to walk into that. And so from my perspective, and when we've been working with students, is to say, look, if I marched in a rally that was around Black Lives Matter and everybody around me was gay, hopefully I wouldn't be fearful of doing that. Hopefully I'm not fearful of who I'm seen with, or fearful of people getting those agendas mixed up. That I can stand on particular issues with somebody. So when it comes to this particular issue, I'm more than happy to come out on that and not be worried that I'm being co-opted into somebody else's agenda.
Yeah. One of the things that you said in our sorry, can you please turn off your mic? Is that like being involved carries a certain kind of cost. So there's a cost to being involved in standing against those racial injustices. What is the cost of, let's say, a white evangelical or young, or whatever age they are, who stand against injustice? What's it going to cost?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. A few years ago, I asked in a gathering of mostly white students, how many students felt like we should give more scholarship money towards Black students, and every person put their hand up. And then I asked them how many of them would be willing to give up part of their current scholarship or their financial aid to the Black students, and every hand went back down again. Mm. And so I think some of the costs come in, for younger white people, it's lesser costs, right? It's lesser who they're seen with. But as it gets older, people begin to worry. you know, if I'm seen marching in a Black Lives Matter, will less people turn up to my church? Will white people be upset that I was there? Will my offerings go down on a Sunday? Especially when you have a larger church, you know, that makes a pretty significant difference. What will my friends say? What will my main constituents say? I think those costs really come up. I think for the younger people, there's less cost because there's less invested in the system.
Yep.
We have talked a bit with particularly younger white people to be really careful on how they're doing this. So if you're driving into the city and protesting against the police, and then you drive back home to a community that's protected by the police and you're enjoying that luxury and benefit, just to say, you know, are you willing to examine that part of your life as well? That you do have this luxury that you go back to, and are you willing to give up some of that luxury as well?
I think we're running out of time here. It would be nice to engage some more, but so I mean, I like what Sarah Kane said earlier on, that she's a struggling racist, and I think there's hope for her in the gospel, and for us to come to a point where we even admit that and repent of that. I think that's the most powerful thing a white woman can say. You are a black, I mean not black, you're a white male who's I don't know, I think you maybe perhaps benefiting from the system, whatever the case may be. What, like, for you personally, what has been some of the things that you've done against racial inequalities? So, like, just thinking particularly about your own household, how are you leading them to live in the world where there's racial injustice and like some of the costs of doing that? So how are you engaging in your own struggles, if I were to ask it that way?
Yeah, so the cost to us, right, is really, really small. And I was thinking about this, Vera said this before at the start about people in South Africa changing the language to suit to make the white person feel comfortable, right? So my experience, and I visited your church a couple of times, and I've been in some of your communities. Our family lives in it and has survived really well because of the incredible grace and welcoming of Black and brown community for us. So, you know, when tensions are going on, my kids are not afraid or worried about things because they've got so many people in our community that protect them and look after them. And so, you know, when we look at the things like Black Lives Matter, my children would say that they know that they're white. My eldest daughter is not white, but the rest of my children would know that their white lives matter because Black people have made it clear that their lives matter. As has my career. Like in the city, I've existed because Black pastors have welcomed me and engaged me. So we've what others might see as being a cost, like we live in a higher crime community. Our kids are in certainly lesser quality school districts, but we've benefited because the Black community is so welcoming. So we send our children to non-white schools. My 3 children, wasn't until they got to university that my middle daughter ever went to school with a white student. So she was the only white child. All my kids have been the only white child in their school, or in their grade. Never once have they been singled out or made to feel worse because of that. They go to non-white churches and they've always been made to feel welcome. So for us, the cost has been the opposite, right? We've felt more welcome and more cared for going into these things. I think the time that we do notice a cost is when, you know, if I'm driving with somebody who's Black and we get pulled over by the police or we get into an altercation, all those kinds of things, that's when we get included. But I would say overall, right, we've benefited from this, from the Black community. Now, from the white side, there's definitely ways that you get pushed aside or ostracized or made to feel like you may not belong. You know, there's been conversations around this even with our own institution that I think we should have been included with, where that voice might not be heard as well. But yeah, it's kind of the opposite experience. Like, you know, having dinner with you guys, like, you make us feel like we belong. And we know that's not the experience of the Black community when they step into the white context most of the time. They never feel like they belong. I would say, like, as a deliberate step, we've tried from the beginning to put our children under non-white leadership and allow them to speak into their lives and have authority and to do it. And I think that's been a significant thing. So when they see context, like when they knew that I was going to be on with you today, David, they're like, oh, can we come on too? Like, we want to see, because they see you as an authority in their life who has embraced them and cared for them. And I think that's one of the real rarities that happens from white families towards black families, is to allow black families to lead. You know, it's easy for us to go and say, we'll come and help you, or we'll come and do these things for you. But to actually say, you know, David, you can be a leader in my house. You're free to talk to my children on any topic you like. You're free to give them instruction and direction. That's where I see this change in power. That's really hard for any white person to do, right? We can give money and we can do nice acts, but will we ever actually give up power and let somebody else speak into our life and have control of our life? I think that's the really, really tough one.
So, I think we have 1 minute left, so we need to wrap it up. Just to say that if you want to stick around, if you have questions for any of our panelists, I hope they will be able to stick around and take some of those questions. I think just in concluding our time together, we're going to do an hour of preaching, so just grab your Bibles. The man of God is about to speak to you. Can I get an amen? Hallelujah. So I think one of the things that I was thinking about, and I've been listening to some pastors speak, is just like the command of Jesus to love, and just to say, I think a lot of this conversation can invoke guilt, and I know with our white brothers who are joining us and sisters, it does seem like there's this weight of guilt and duty that one feels when they're part of these conversations. And I mean, this verse just stands out for me in the words of Jesus in John 13, and he says to his disciples, after he's washed his disciples' feet, "A new command I give you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another." And he says, "By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And obviously he's talking to them as a community, but I think that's so powerful for us as a mixed batch of people, particularly in the Christian community, that I think the hope for our white brothers and sisters is one, I think Jesus is quite clear that he commands them to love, just as he commands every other Christian. So the command and duty is quite clear, and I think a lot of it has come out from tonight's talk. But I think just understanding that verse, it really strikes me that the love for one another flows from the love that Christ gave for us. And I think that's the most powerful thing to think about, that you have both the duty, somebody say duty, somebody shout duty, nobody. You have both the duty and the enablement to carry out what's been said this evening. So there is hope. We've labored the issue of duty, that you are called to love. You're called to, as a Christian, black or white, to be involved and to be broken by what breaks God's heart. So that's quite clear. But I think the resources that we have is immense. We have a lot of resources in the gospel that enables us to love as God has called us to. So I think just even thinking about Clayton's comment earlier, I think guilt is a motivator, but it can only take you so far. Like, you need to be motivated by something way more powerful. And I think the gospel is way more powerful, because what the gospel does is that it firstly makes you recognize your sin, and racism is a sin. It humbles you to admit it, that Christ died for that sin, for every other sin, and that's you're free to actually live for him, because he's done so. So it gives you an ability to repent from the sin and to depend on God's power to assist you. So just to leave it there and to say that it's not enough to keep on saying that I'm not racist. You called by Jesus to fight against injustice, and he's given you every resource in his gospel to enable you to do so. So if you live this chart, please live with that there's actually a lot of resources given to you by Jesus. He's poured out his love for you so that you would be able in turn to love others. We've come to the end of our formal session. The Bishop Martin Morrison, the legend, is here, and the legend is going to end of our time with a benediction, a prayer, and his prayers are blessed, by the way, because he's bishop. So can I ask the boss to end of our session together? Say one or two comments if you so wish.
Can I suggest that Martin prays in Zulu? That's all I'm saying.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, siyabonga mfundisi, siyabonga bishop wethu omkhulu.
Yebo, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just to thank David and Black and all the people on the panel. It has been so helpful, and I've been listening. And it's my joy and privilege to have you all as brothers and sisters, and to be able to learn from you and listen to you. So that's my huge privilege, and thank you. Thank you, David and Black, for all the work you've done and for all that you are. My privilege to work with you. Thanks to Cos and to Vera and Sarah and Clayton and Kristen. You've all shared so honestly and openly. And that's been my privilege. So let me pray and ask God to help us. Oh Lord, we come to you because we are in such great need, and we are so mindful of our own brokenness and the brokenness of our world. And Father, we are desperate for your grace, for your spirit, for your power, for your help. We thank you, Father, that we do have the gospel. We thank you that we have your spirit. We thank you that we have each other. And Lord, I just want to thank you so much for my brothers and sisters that you have raised up, and that you have given great wisdom and the ability to share what so many of us find so difficult to express. And so we do thank you for one another. And Lord, will you help us as a community of God's people, that we may deal with these difficult issues that we all struggle with, and they grieve us, Lord. So will you help us? And will you help us to make a difference as God's people? So go with us now, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen.
Kobe, your mic is off, bro.
David.
Sorry about that. Just thank you for everyone who's joined us. If you want the recording, you can always email me at davidk@christchurchmidrand.co.za. If you missed that, you can go onto our website and find us there. If you're free to leave, thank you for joining us, especially those who are joining us from other churches. We hope that this has been helpful for you. We are going to stick around for those who want to, for some question and answers. We've been getting a lot of those on the group. So this is to release you if you want to leave, but if you still want to hang out, we're more than happy to do so. We'll take just a few minutes to gather those questions, and then we'll ask our panelists, those who can stay around, to stick around. Black, do you mind just leading the?
Yeah. So I already got the questions. Yeah, so I think people obviously will leave as they leave, but we'll just continue with the chat. Again, thank you for all the questions that you submitted, and we just gonna pose those to our panelists and just engage on them. The first question is actually a question I have for cause. So I know other Christians have been saying that the reason why they don't want to engage in Black Lives Matter. I mean, you kind of mentioned how Black Lives Matter will obviously encompass a lot of other social issues, the homosexual issue being one of them, and so other Christians are saying they don't want to engage on that level. But another fear that I've seen Christians speak about is that if we partake in Black Lives Matter, for example, they obviously challenging power, they challenging institutions that hold power in society, and one of those pillars is the church. That after they done speaking about racism and all of that, they're gonna come after Christians, and for those Christians that stand on the truth of Scripture and just some of the clear truth that speaks against some of the things that are in our culture, homosexuality being one of those things, that the people that we marching with right now later on are going to come against us for people who hold on to the truth of Scripture. So I don't know if you can help us navigate that. Is that a thing? One, if it is, how can we navigate those waters, cause?
Yeah, so I think, right, there's a lot of fear. I mean, we went through this with the immigration movement, that when you have power, you're fearful of losing power. I can't imagine why we'd be fearful of losing the gospel in any way. And I've reflected more and more the past week about, you know, the scandalous behavior of Jesus, right? He was caught talking to prostitutes and letting them touch him, and he was caught with money launderers, and he was caught with a criminal element, and it didn't seem to diminish the gospel. And so I think that's a message we have to keep saying is what are we fearful of? Are we truly fearful of any? I mean, who can stop me praying? Who can stop me reading Scripture? Who can stop me doing these things? I think what we're fearful of is the destruction of the power that we have. In America, I find it hilarious at times that the church is like, well, we want the separation of church and state, but we want the government to give us all the benefits that they can. And so we're fearful of losing our non-profit status. We're fearful of losing all these different power bases. And yeah, so I don't think we should be fearful of those things. I'm not fearful of anybody coming and dismantling that piece, but I think that the church, there's elements of the church that need to be dismantled, particularly the power structure that's existed, that's been complicit with the institutional racism, because it's given us power. And if I can go into church on a Sunday and be reminded that I have power, why would I want to disrupt any of that? So yeah, it's a good question.
Sure. So thank you for that, cause. A question then to Sarah. Sarah, somebody asked, how does Sarah help her Black adopted children to build cultural identity in a country that is healing from apartheid?
Well, because I'm a Christian, our identity is in Christ, and that's. It sounds simple, but it is as simple as that. It doesn't take away from their lived experience. So it doesn't take away from, sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes we do get looked at in the shops, just like Clayton was talking about. And sometimes I have been asked if that's my child. And sometimes, we've had all sorts of weird and wonderful experiences. And sometimes someone speaks to Max in the vernacular and he gets really upset about it. So, you know, we have those experiences, and but it's a constant reminder that we are all adopted, our families in Jesus, and we have not just it's not just Lee that's Max's role model. We have other role models in the church that look like Max, you know, that look like holly, and that's the benefit of being part of this beautiful, hugely diverse church, is that we don't only draw on our own personal culture. We have a much larger, much more powerful culture in our church and in Christ, and that's what we really drill into and focus on with our kids. It's a constant reminder that we are children of Christ. We are different. We are not of this world. We are, that's how we do it, and we might not always get it right, but that's our approach.
Sure. Thanks for that, Sarah. The next question, I think, David, you can answer this. Cause spoke to it a little bit, and I think Clayton kind of touched on it earlier on. But I think this is probably just some practical steps, and you can help us here, Kobedi. But how does somebody help their church leadership understand issues of race, white privilege, and how do you get them to talk about these issues?
I think in community and with difficulty, I think one of the things that you see in scripture is that relationships are messy, like not just white and black relationships, but in general, whether it be marriage or like relating to other Christians, there's just always going to be a friction of living in a sinful world. So I think, and God has given us the means of grace, which is the community as a place where the gospel is lived out. And that's something beautiful that we get to live out in as sinful as we are, get to see how the gospel really shapes us, which is why there's so many things in the Bible about if your brother wrongs you, this is how you should approach it. So Jesus knew that living in a sinful world means we're gonna wrong each other, we're gonna rub each other the wrong way. So I think the Christian community is a space for us to safely engage with any issue, and particularly the issue of race. And I think God has given us that community to do so. It's a community of love. It's a community of where we realize that we sinners, we all sinners. It's a community where we should not hide sin under the carpet, no matter what form it takes. And I think it's particularly the sin of racism, because it breaks what God is trying to build, which is His church. So I think the community would be the place to do that. I think I've been being in a diverse church, sometimes tempted to think, shucks, man, it would be nice to not have to deal with it. Like it would be nice to just have a church where, I mean, race is not the issue, but then it will be a black church, and then there'll be other issues. So I think we engage in community, we persevere with one another, we should, and we need to recognize that it's going to be awkward, it's going to be tough, you're not always going to like it, but Jesus calls us to do that. I'm not sure if it answers the question.
Yeah. So I think there's clear practicalities there in community, just the awareness that it is going to be a difficult process. It's not going to be easy at all.
Yeah.
I think just because it is difficult does not mean it's not worth it. Like you said,
but
Jesus come do so.
Sorry, just to add to that is that, like, for young black Christians, I think, I don't know who was saying this earlier on, but there's just a fatigue, and I think a temptation to look back and say, shucks, maybe we forgave too quickly. Maybe we're just tired, if you get what I mean. And it's like there is a sense in which there is a loss of hope. And I think one of the things that we need to do is to regain the hope and say, shucks, man, when I engage and consistently engage, there is promise in the gospel that people will change. So I lean on that and not give up, because I think the temptation is to give up and say things will never change. There will always be like this. So I think leaning on God's promises that people are extremely sinful, Jesus has dealt with that sin, and people can change.
Sure. And I think that's the heart of why we wanted to have this conversation. And this particular thing I'm going to say is for our white brothers and sisters, is because of that fatigue that young Black Christians have. We feel like it's not, especially for white Christians, it's not the time for them to be silent. We need to all be engaging. We need to all be talking, especially as Christians, Black and white, around these issues, because there is a fatigue from young Black Christians. So I think just to hammer that point again, that yeah, there was a time for the silence, so that Black voices can be heard. Black voices should be leading the narrative of their own stories, their own pain. But I think there is a clear call now that let's all come out with our voices. White voices particularly need to be talking and engaging in these issues. And yes, there is sensitivity, there is a fear, but let's, as Christians, not just a Black guy, but as a Christian, let me walk with you with your fears. Let me walk with you with whatever it is that you feel might be insensitive. Let's chat about that. But we are tired of being the only ones talking. So yeah, shout outs to that. In fact, that leads us to the next question. I think it's his name is Matthew. I don't know if he's still in the group, but Matthew asked, how do you approach a person how do you approach your white friends and tell them about the problem of racism in a manner that is respectful, in a manner that is not harmful, and to show them that racism is wrong? I don't know if Clayton can speak to that, and Sarah as well. So how do we approach our friends? Maybe practical means, Clayton, if you can help us with that, to start the conversation with somebody who is Indian, somebody who's white, somebody who's non-Black.
Yeah, tough question. Look, I think, it's important for us to be intentional about these things. I heard someone once say that racist jokes are only funny if you share the underlying assumption or stereotype that goes along with it. And so, when we hear these kinds of things, it's important to ask ourselves, do we share that underlying stereotype? Do we share that underlying assumption? And if we don't, then it's important for us to say something about it. I think as Christians, we are not there to win the racial argument. You see it in shopping centers and in coffee shops, and when people argue and it's an interracial conflict, it's about winning arguments. And as Christians, we're about winning people. So the argument is important, and it's important to bring out your viewpoint. But at the end of the day, as a Christian, you want to help that person understand correctly, bring in another perspective, etc. And so, I think that gentleness is important. Firmness and is also important. But the one thing I find in South Africa is that we can have such diverse perspectives on the most mundane of matters in this country, and it seems as if we've come from completely different histories that didn't interact at any point, and a lot of it has to do with our apartheid system and how that kept us away from not only from each other but from information. And so information is important. I mean, in the Indian community, as an example, you'll hear people very easily say, Indians value education, and that's why they're in top positions in the country. And that's true to some extent. They do value education. But the narrative will continue, and the narrative will say things like, Indians, they sacrificed a lot. People worked hard. They put aside money so that their kids could go to university, their kids could become professionals, etc., etc. And so in other words, they're saying that, no matter what the apartheid government did, we still valued education, we still put aside money, and as a result, we're better off today. So, we pulled ourselves up, by our own bootstraps in a way. And you'll hear that kind of narrative in the Indian community. Nothing could be further from the truth. We don't live in the apartheid society anymore. There's an information, where information was kept from us. The records show that for every 3,000 rands was spent on putting an Indian child through to school. About 10,000 was spent on a white child, and about 760 rands was spent on a black child. The records are there. So it's that information that actually, if you put it out to people and say, but look, what about this? What about the fact that more resources were spent on Indians? And so therefore, they're in a better position educationally. Yes, they may have saved. Yes, they may have, done other things to supplement that, but the information is there. And so the point I'm trying to make is that, whilst under apartheid information was kept from us, today it's not. The information is there. It's our responsibility, to look at it, to read it, to try and understand it, make sense of it, and try and see how does that information shape the opinions or thoughts, etc., that we have today. We can't blame a lack of information and use that as an excuse for ignorance. In the past, it was deliberately kept away from us. Today, it's not. So I'm saying that we've got to confront people, with information, love, with humility, and with the aim of trying to win them over and trying to help them understand, why what they're saying is wrong, why their viewpoint is wrong. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. No, I think that definitely does help. And I think it's worth just reiterating, but the point of gentleness and the point of love in approach to the stuff, and the facts, not avoiding that, because I think there tends to be a lot of generalization when it comes to these conversations, but not actually considering the facts and how things have turned out because of those things. One person asks, how can we start helping people to heal from racism, people who encounter racism on a daily basis? So if anyone in the panel just wants to hit us with that, somebody who probably works at a job where they encounter racism, or somebody who goes to a school where they encounter racism on a daily basis, what could be some of the things that we can help them with to either start healing or how can we help in general?
Is this now a black person, I'm guessing?
Yeah, it's a black person who asked.
So, well, I'll have to think about that a bit.
Okay. Anyone else? That's why I don't want to put anyone particular on the spot, because I think it's a big one. So if anyone wants to just take a jab at it.
I mean, I think, again, and I think with Sunday school, we always say Jesus is the answer. We always say that the gospel to adults is the answer. And I think we need to double click on what that actually means. So, I mean, to answer the question, well, I think that's why we have the gospel. It's there to heal all that is broken in our world. But what does that actually mean? I think so. Maybe let me head it in a couple of phrases there, just with justice, knowing that ultimately God is the one who is in control, who is going to bring about justice, and that nothing is going to slip through his fingers, and I think for us that's very comforting, because I think the natural response when you hurt is to want to head back or want to avenge. Just when I personally watch videos of cops being brutal, I feel like getting a gun and shooting a cop. I mean, I'm not in the States, but it's just like I'm moved and infuriated, and I want to take justice in my own hands. So just understanding that justice belongs to God, and that if he was to be just now, we will all fall. If he were to bring out his sword and bring about justice, we would all be cut. We will all have to pay. And I think that to understand it from there helps us to then start developing an understanding of what Jesus did in dying for sinful people, which we all are, and to seek, I think, people who have grieved us. Is that even a word? My English is running out. It's 8 o'clock. Who have grieved us, to be forgiven. I think that the gospel enables us to do so, because gospel cuts through all of our hearts and not just the racist. Because I think, I dare say this as a black guy, there is a sense in which, like, the sin of racism, which I think that's why white people struggle to say, hey, I'm racist. It's a sin. Let's deal with it. I think we've elevated it to an unforgivable sin, and I think we shouldn't. It should be like any other sins that people confess and speak out and repent of. So yeah, just that issue of justice and understanding that God came to forgive us, therefore we can forgive others, but that God is making the world better, and not just that we are going to sometime die and go to heaven, but in the here and now, God is transforming our world. His kingdom is breaking in against the powers of darkness, and yes, we live in this tension of pain and grief, but actually there is hope. And I think for me, in any topic, that's where I want to land as a Christian, that I don't look at the world in a pessimistic way. I'm a gospel optimist. I know that for those who know me, would be like, what, you're an optimist? In the gospel, I think there is a lot of hope. And I think those things don't necessarily take away our pain, but they help us get perspective on it. And they begin to lead us in the path to healing, because part of it is I can't heal because I'm holding on to this pain that the people have inflicted on me. But when you understand all of those things about the nature of God and what he has done and the nature of humanity, I think that can begin to loose us from the ties of unforgiveness and our pain. So yeah, I think that's my step at it.
Okay, I think that what David is saying is there's various support that we can provide to the person, from prayer to biblical psychosocial support, etc. But there are other ways that we could think about supporting the person. So if they're experiencing racism in the workplace, as an example, there are people in the church that understand labor legislation, that understand human resource policies, that could help the person navigate those things and find recourse in that legislation or policy. Should they want to do so? Should they desire to do so? So there are people with skills, there are professionals in our church who can certainly, be that resource that we could draw upon, so that we could help this person fight, racial inequality in as how they're experiencing it, should they desire to do so. And with Christians playing a very practical role in helping them navigate that. Because I think to a large extent, the laws in our country protect someone, from racial injustice in the workplace. The application of those laws vary from institution to institution, but they are there, to give recourse to the person. So that's another way, in which we can help support the person.
And I think that in schools, I think as students, I think we need to make sure that there's a platform, there's a space for students to speak out about racism. I think there's far too many students who have been quiet about racism that they've experienced, from student to student, or even from racial discrimination they've experienced from a teacher. And I think that as students, that we should create a platform, and we should create a safe space for students to come and say, I've had these kind of issues. And I think that for people who are in positions of power in schools, is to also promote this kind of safe space, to promote a safe, just a safe space where students can come and openly say that I've experienced this kind of racism, I've experienced this kind of racial discrimination. And I think that we need to have more spaces like that for students, more spaces for that, like that for young activists, just our youth.
Sure, that's cool. That's dope. Anything you want to add, Sarah or Cause, on that? How can we help somebody just navigate the scars of racism on a daily?
Sorry, Vera has had a hand up for like a while. I'm not sure if she's wanting to add to the conversation as well.
Sure. Vera.
Thanks, Reggie. So I think it's a very, very hard question to answer, but I'm trying to answer it from my perspective of being a white person and listening to a black friend. And I think that sometimes I've been in that position of just being able to listen to my black friend telling the story of their racism, and to hear their pain and stand next to them with the pain. And my feeling is that sometimes in the Christian church, we're not that good at handling emotions. So we tend to jump very quickly to grace, and we should go to grace. But I think we need to hear that people are hurt and people are angry as well. And in the Bible, we read of many instances of anger that does not lead to sin. And that's what we're told to do. We're told to be angry and not sin. And I think part of being able to work through that anger and to actually air the pain underneath is having an opportunity to really speak about it. And sometimes I hope that I, as a white person listening to a black person's pain in a story of racism, can actually be part of that healing. And I know it's not comfortable, but I try not to take it personally, because this is not about me. This is not aimed at me, but this is a real story of pain, a real happening of pain that is related to other white people. So I don't know if that helps.
Sorry, I was turning my mic on. Yeah. Thanks, Vera, for that. Definitely do think that's helpful. And I think it adds as well to just the conversation that we're having today, seeing people walking in their shoe. And I think that helps, because sometimes we do just jump into, here's the solution, without actually getting to the heart of the person or the pain that they're actually going through, and walking with them through that. So thank you so much for that insight. Super valuable. David wanted to ask Cause a question, and I think just an indication, because I know some people are time conscious, so we're aiming to end at 8:15. So at least you know that we're not imprisoning you for the rest of the night. So 8:15 we aim to end. Yeah.
There's freedom to eat. Because in our conversation, you spoke about how your university is kind of dealing with this. So just with I'm not sure if you can share this. Maybe we'll edit out that part if we post it online. So feel free. Let me stop recording. are you free to share, or must I stop recording?
Yeah, I can share. Yeah, that's the risk, right?
So just like, I think a comment on like powers. So there's been a lot of talk on like dismantling power. Like, what does that even mean? Yeah, as a school, like, how are you guys navigating this this whole thing currently? So you mentioned some stuff in our conversation. Can you just?
Yeah, so and bring back up if I miss what you're looking for. But yeah, the first response was just posting a Bible verse, which just made people angrier. The second was just saying we hate all sin, which again didn't address the actual issues going on. The third was a long post that kind of said, well, we're all sinners, and we've got some flaw in history, but America's still just in a great country, and it's founded on great Christian principles. And then the final one that just came out this weekend was actually an apology for some of the systemic racism. So our university was partly founded by Schofield, who's one of the architects of dispensationalism, but also who taught this idea of the curse of Ham, being that if you're black, you're part of the curse. Now that was in Bibles at our university, at least until 2000, maybe even later. So that stuff there's some slow pieces on there, but it's really difficult still to get people to see, because when they sit around the table, they're sitting around as a group of white people talking about what they think, right? And because there's very little accountability for the institution to the black population, which for me is the same as a church. So if you're at a church with 1% black population, then you could lose that 1% and really not be affected that much. But if you're going to lose 20% or 30% of your population, then you have to take more notice. So it's a slow thing for us, I think. I think on the weekend we made some steps forward. But yeah, it's really hard for people to see. Like, it's hard to see that if every person in your student life in authority is white, how does that feel if you're black to come with an issue for student life? How does it feel whether they understand your culture or your dynamic? And also your constituency, because there's fear that if you come out and say things like Black Lives Matter, then you'll lose the support of the white community, and you'll lose the money that comes from the white community. And I'd say the final piece is in higher education. It's generally not considered to be a high academic if you're black or Latino. So when people come and see more black faculty or more Latino faculty, it doesn't attract white students in general. And we've seen that in schools as well. You know, where my daughter went, where my wife teaches, is a black school that's housed in a white church building. Why don't white families send their children there? It's a Christian school because black kids go there. And that's the same across all their campuses. The majority of their campuses are housed with white churches, but those churches won't send their kids to those schools. Even though they're academically very, very good schools, because when they see black kids. And so that's one of the real challenges is institutions and churches in the white evangelical is trying to make these calculations of how far can we go without losing our donor base and losing our money.
Another question for me as a minister, so there's a lot of not negativity, but when people say their church, it often comes with a lot of weight on, shucks, the church is not doing 1, 2, 3. Like, so there's a lot of on that. At the same time, when like I read scripture, I'm like, sure, like the church is like it's at the core of what God is trying to do in our world. So just honest thought on that. Like, are we in any way being overly negative? Is there some ways in which we've seen the actual breaking in of the kingdom through the local church? Can you share maybe the negative and the positive of that you've seen firsthand?
Yeah, just briefly, I would say what I experienced in South Africa when I visited the white communities and the white churches was similar to white evangelicalism here, which is it's a culture, right? It's if you break it down, it doesn't reflect the kingdom that well. Most of what we do is cultural, and the society was built. I mean, your society was built even more so on a cultural dynamic where the church supported that cultural dynamic, the white church. a kingdom perspective, absolutely, you know, to go out to some of these rallies and see pastors from hundreds of different churches gathering together and praying together and calling together is been really great. But as an institution, I think that's where we've got to call, like, have we become as a church more of a cultural institution, or are we still centered and focused on the gospel? Because when I'm centered on the gospel, then when I see you hurting, I have to hurt. Right? It's why I think sometimes our responses to the racism stuff is too gentle. If I walked outside and saw police officers beating you with sticks, I hope I would intervene. But why wouldn't I intervene when I see somebody in a store responding to you in a racist way? I think I'm still called to do that.
And I think like the call to Jesus to be disciples, because I think we do come from a Christianized society. So even when we think of church, like it's very much an institution, but like if you think about Christian discipleship and what it is, I think that's what you are referring to, that as disciples of Jesus, he's calling us to do the things that that he's commanded us to do. And that's what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And I think when we start thinking in those terms, that's when we will engage more, because Jesus, we understand that we're not just like an institution, but we are followers of Jesus who have been called to actually follow him, do some of the things that he's called us to, and to stop discussing it in the Greek. It is awesome to, so I think we need to end. Some of us have families.
David,
What is that?
can you talk about next week?
So just to say that this is not a platform just for racial discussions, but it's also a platform where we discuss how the gospel impacts all of life. Next week is Father's Day, so we will be particularly focusing on the issue of the gospel and how it shapes, or how our experiences of fatherhood has shaped the message of the gospel and how we hear it. So that's going to be exciting. We're going to have a panel. We're going to have a powerful preacher from Tembisa blessing us with the word of God. So please come through to join us next week. Hashtag Life Under Lockdown. That's what our series is, and we're discussing everything concerning life under lockdown. There's a lot of stuff on gender-based violence that's going on right now. I think after fatherhood, that's what we should be talking about. Not because we want to be appear relevant and cool or whatever the case may be. I'm not cool, Black is. But because we're deeply concerned about discipleship, we're deeply concerned by what it means to be a Christian and live as a Christian in the world where God has placed us. So that's our number one desire. Please go onto our website, www, as our rector normally never says the dot, .christchurchmidrand.co.za. We might be posting this, but we will be definitely giving you information on what's happening in the next couple of months. So we do hope that you'll join us. It's been lovely to have you. Melanie! So
yeah, and I think as we end, Kobedi, just acknowledging that everybody had a bunch of other questions. We obviously couldn't get to them because of time.
Yes.
So Royden and myself are just chatting through having a podcast where we're gonna address more of these questions. So the information that David has given you about our website and where you can find us, we'll try and put up those episodes where we go into depth about a lot of these questions around race issues. So please be posted on our website. We're going to continue the conversation. Obviously, like David said, this is not just a platform for race, but we want to continue the conversation somewhere else. So thank you for your questions, and we will definitely be addressing them.
Cool, thank you so much. yeah, we've prayed to end it off, so please feel free to slip out.